This episode of the Noble Warrior Podcast is brought to you by CK Lin Mindset Coaching for Entrepreneurs. Whatever mental blocks in your life you want to overcome as an entrepreneur, fears of failure, inability to take the actions you know there is to take, fear of success, 3 steps forward and 4 steps back, or even that thought of not feeling deserving after achieving all the success. Coaching is one of the most valuable tools you can have. It's an investment in yourself, and it can yield some of the highest returns. CK Lin has the skills that will empower you to achieve the most accelerated results you've dreamed of. To help you get started, CK is offering podcast listeners a free strategy session with him, a $1,000 value. Visit talkwithck.com and schedule your free session today.
I'm really excited to be doing this podcast with James Lin. Why I want to have James on the show is he's a serial entrepreneur and he's also really committed to his personal and professional development. And I want to hear how they are operationalizing what they learn from different modalities, different domains, and bring that into their life, bring that into their relationships, bring that into their businesses. So thank you so much for being on the show, James.
Thank you, CK. I am honored and grateful for this opportunity to share my story and to share with your listeners and share with the world.
So why don't we actually start off from, why did you say yes to my invitation, to my request?
Well, for one, I realized that through my journey, I discovered my purpose. And my purpose is to share my journey and to serve. And it was just the right time and moment for me as I have gone through this incredible journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and I realize I have a voice I want to share. So the right opportunity came at the right moment.
Oh, beautiful. Was there a moment where you realized, like, I have a story I want to share?
Yes. When I was at Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny, the first one that I went to in December, I discovered my destiny. And at that moment, I realized this path of, I've gone through, and we all go through so much, but by sharing it, even when I can impact one person, I feel that I'm growing and sharing my light. So there's a moment, well, first at UPW,
which is what?
Unleash the Power Within, in November. I broke free of so many limiting beliefs. Beliefs that, came from perhaps when I was young and, when I was bullied or when I first moved to America and I felt made to feel like not enough. I didn't understand the culture, I didn't understand the language. And so from that, I feel in the past I would just stay low to the ground. I remember distinctively being bullied very badly when I was 5 or 6, and just somehow it's called the genesis of identity.
Okay.
Where when you're young, when you feel like something happened where it caused you pain, and then in that age you made a decision. And that decision was from suffering and that pain of being picked on, I learned to be very private or just stay low to the ground. Yeah. And so when I broke free of those limiting beliefs, I felt, I want to share it. I want to share how I broke free.
How did you break free? You don't have to share a specific process per se. I mean, unless you want to. But share with us, unpack that a little bit. How did you actually break free? Because I would assert from the people who are listening they may have already identified some limiting beliefs or mindset that they know that it's holding them back, but they are unable to let that limiting belief go.
Yes.
So how did you do that?
So one was at UPW they have a lot of different exercises.
Sure.
Where one in particular is called the Dickens process.
Sure.
Most people, they don't want to go into the pain or into the fear,
Right.
and that process actually makes you dive in and make that pain double, triple, and then from that utilize pain to shift your perspective into seeing the same scenario but from a new point. Right? So during the Dickens process at UPW, I recall the pain of being bullied, or when I first moved to America as a child, I didn't see it as this opportunity to go and for better education, the American dream that my parents had in mind. I just saw it as being removed away from my father because he stayed in Asia. So the Dickens process, you go into the pain and you magnify, and then from that you look at how that decision has impacted you in the past, right? Like how has it affected? I was relatively shy and didn't really know who I was, looking externally for affirmation or love. But when I went through the process, you then move it to the present. How has that decision that happened to you, or what happened to you in the past, how has that affected you in the present? And then it affects your relationship with your family, with your friends, with yourself, right? And then it's very interesting because it then goes into the future. See, most people don't change because they don't feel like enough pain or enough pleasure to change. That's how you create lasting change. So by doing that process where you bring up these old beliefs of I'm not enough, or it's the number 1 and 2 fear that people have is that I'm not enough and I'm not loved. Right? So
I'm not loved for who I am. I'm loved because of XYZ achievement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the decision, another decision I made when I was very young, because I, when I came to LA, I just fell in love with basketball. Showtime and Michael Jordan, but I always remember being just so bad at it, and I distinctively remember a time where, I was always picked last in school in the playground. This was when I was 5 or 6, and I recall this moment of just feeling like I was about to be picked last, and it's usually the 2 most popular kids on the court that becomes the captain, and they pick, right? So one time I was supposed to be picked last already. I was already last, but this guy said, "No, I don't want him. It sucks too bad." I was very short. I was uncoordinated, to say the least. And I remember when he said that, the other captain said, "You have to take him. Otherwise, it'll be 6 versus 4. It'll be unbalanced." And so they got into a fight, a physical fight, a brawl in front of me over how badly I sucked. And I remember feeling so embarrassed and such pain of feeling not enough that I ran home, and I was expressing myself to my grandmother, just beating myself up, just oh man, there's something that I love so much, but I wasn't born with it. And she basically looked at me and said, "What are you going to do about it?" And I remember making a decision.
The wisdom of grandmother.
The wisdom of grandmother, she comforted me with some amazing Taiwanese food. And then she said, "What are you going to do about it?" And I remember being 6 years old and putting my foot on the ground and saying, "No matter what, I'm going to be great at basketball. So I made a decision of my outcome. And, you know, I basically learned the 10,000 hour rule. Like, so I was just practicing all the time. I was playing basketball. I had basketball with me wherever I went. And I said, what do you have to do? You have to, you know, shoot the hoop like 20,000 times. You have to dribble like 50,000 times in order to be good. But the key is, it wasn't work for me. I loved it. I enjoyed the entire process of it. So, you know, it took like 10 years before I got to like high school. You know, I made the team. And there was an amazing coach who believed in me, made me captain. And in that year that I was captain, our team won championship for the first time in like 22 years. And I remember another decision from that was like, look, I feel, you know, like I overcame something that I thought was impossible. And that was a core part of who I became, because, you know, that belief is still with me today. Like, I could pick up a completely new hobby and just have zero talent in it, but if I decide the outcome and I'm willing to, you know, give it my all without worrying about failing, without giving up, like, eventually I'll be good at it.
Right.
Yeah. So from that was like a belief that came about. But then I started to tie achievement with what I was really after, which is love and approval, you know, from my family, from my father. And through my journey, when I realized, you know, through pain and suffering, I realized that it had nothing to do with achievement. It's like what they say, the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. And when I awakened, it had nothing to do with, you know, the businesses that I started. You know, I started a business in my mother's garage with a few $100s. I built it up. I got very lucky, you know, and I just was always creating value or looking for ways to create value. But there was maybe a subconscious thing there that was like, but then I'll feel, you know, acknowledgement.
Then they'll love me.
Then they'll love me.
Yeah,
exactly.
They'll validate me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I broke free of that and realized that the foundation, the core of value that I was looking for was love and connection. And, you know, I opened up to my father. I expressed to him, you know, this is how I felt. And I learned something called the 5 love languages.
Well, before you go there, actually, I'm curious. What caused the awakening moment? Was it just simply you were laying around one night and it came to you, or was there through a specific process or a specific book or a specific teacher? How did you awake yourself?
You know that feeling when, you know, you work so hard for something, and then when it finally arrives, you know, how long does that feeling usually last for?
A nanosecond.
Nanosecond, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't last that long. So I realized through the progress of whether it be investments or building businesses, I realized I was always still seeking more and more externally. But when I started going through this incredible self-discovery of finding myself, I was you know, just learning a lot of different truths, you know, out there, and then defining who I am. There were certain moments of a peak, and again, usually relates with pain. Like, so for my father, I expressed to him like, you know how much I love you, bro. And you know, he wasn't expressing that back, and I was like starting to, you know, like, you know, feeling uncomfortable, like, why isn't he saying it back? And then I caught myself, the new me,
The awareness.
Yeah, the awareness of like, you know what, he's talking really quick. Let me hear what he's actually saying. And I've learned that my grandfather never expressed to him,
To your father.
to my father, like that he loves him. So then I realized, he doesn't even know the word. It's a generational thing. But through journey of self-discovery, exploring the world, just like being present and truthful to yourself, like what you are really about, I uncovered that. And then from that, I basically, ran with it. Yeah.
I asked that question because I would also speculate that a lot of people who are listening to this are either aspirational entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are striving to make their first hit, right? A single. And to them, it's like, oh, why are you guys talking about this? I want to be successful. But from all the high performers, entrepreneurs, leaders that I met, at some point they realized like that is an empty pursuit.
Yes.
I mean, yes, go for that success for sure. But at some point they realized like, wow, is that all there is? Is it all about hitting my net worth goal or my revenue goal or my relationship goal? Whatever. So was there a moment where you felt like that existential stress? Was there a moment?
Yeah, I feel like a specific moment would probably be like when I felt great pain and suffering, and I realized that it had nothing to do with money, success. It had to do with internally finding what you're about. See, most people, they see like very successful people, right? They it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg, right? They can see the surface and they're like, oh, they're successful, but they can make assumptions like, oh, they never suffered pain, or they never, they were born with it, or something like that. What I realized through my journey is to really be successful, it's not about what you can achieve, it's what you can serve, what value you can bring to the world. And there's a distinction there, because people who focus on, let's say, a number, that's what they focus on. They just, can manifest that. But that the highest dream that you can set could be the limit that you're holding yourself back. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So what other processes have you come across that really help you let go of these limiting beliefs?
So through my journey, like basically just uncovering so much from within through UPW, through Date with Destiny. I basically been on this journey, or this year, I essentially opened myself up to just growing for the sake of contributing. And from that, I basically I've done Landmark, looking into TM. I've been training in
Transcendental meditation.
Yes. I've been training in Europe, everything from public speaking to coaching to empowering people. So I've learned to just free myself from there's just one perspective, one truth, and to just dive into just learning what's out there. What is the best in the world, and how they're sharing, how they're teaching, how they are empowering people, and from that, creating my truth, if you will.
Well, how did you pick these teachers? What are your criteria for picking these teachers? Is it just through what they say online? Was it through friends' recommendation? Was it through a felt experience with them?
So I learned about this idea of modeling after the masters from Tony Robbins. So again, I've been to probably like 8-9 events. I
This
still
year,
have this year,
which is a lot.
Yeah. So I've been traveling all over the world, and part of it is modeling after someone who's already excellent, who's already outstanding in what they are, in their gifts. Part of it's an intuitive part of me that I've learned to uncover, of trusting your instinct when people are talking about their experiences. So, one of the things I would do is go around asking people, what is one book that absolutely changed your life? And then I would, when I ask for, let's say, recommendations and opinions, I found, I think maybe from entrepreneurship, like a lot of times people ask questions that are biased, like in some way.
Okay.
Like if I say, if I ask this question of like, oh, I heard CrossFit's amazing. I've heard so much great things about it. What's your experience with CrossFit, or how has CrossFit empowered you? That's leading you to an answer of what I want to hear, versus, what's one tool that you use that has absolutely empowered you, and just open slate.
I see.
And so learning to ask better questions, learning that the quality of questions that we ask determines the quality of life that we have. Yeah. And then intuitively, I've gotten better and better at trusting my instinct of like, oh, that resonates with me. Dr. Joe Dispenza, or this book about flow, about stealing fire. There's so much content. There's so much out there.
Right. We have this buffet of information source that we can all get. Yeah.
Correct. And we all have these, filters that we can tell what's authentic to who we are. So just being on the lookout with that intention has really helped me, once breaking free of the limiting beliefs of seeking externally validation or externally acknowledgement, from within, seeing what resonates with me. And then just, being open to talking to a lot of people, about what's transformed their life. And then as they're speaking their truth, see what resonates with you.
So what are some of the books that you have come across that change your life, that empowers your life?
Sure, I have a few. Like I would say one of the earlier ones was 4-Hour Workweek.
Okay.
By Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
So when I started building my business, I was always of the mindset, I applied that same idea of basketball. Like, I'm just gonna work.
Outwork everyone.
Just outwork everyone. Just and I remember just this mindset of, okay, I'm just gonna, and there was success with that. But when I read that book about the 4-Hour Workweek, it just opened my mind to what is possible, right? So then I started testing. I started, I'm gonna go buy a ticket. I was always a planner before, but I'm gonna buy a ticket and I'm gonna show up somewhere in the world and then just see what happens. So oftentimes, again, people go away from fear and pain. Now I've learned the greatest reward is where the fear and pain is.
Right.
Like, why is it causing you pain? Why is it causing you fear?
Right.
And then, again, usually it's something that, maybe happened even when we were so young that unconsciously we took that and made a decision with that. But then when you flip that on the upside, you're like, oh my God, I just love flowing all the time. Like, for example, with flow, like I remember, when I first came to the U.S., I was always like, dancing. I was always, Michael Jackson, and I was always like dancing and jumping up and down. I remember somewhere along the lines of growing up, people would say, oh, why are you so happy? Or like, why, calm down,
Right.
And I think just subconsciously I turned down the volume, so to speak. And it wasn't until I discovered flow. That's part of my destiny, is to be flow, to share flow, and to teach flow. And so
I love that.
And just recognizing who you are.
You should write that down somewhere.
I do.
Yeah,
I have a poster here that they have at
that's great.
That you create, where you visually remind yourself, like, what do you stand for, right? To the listeners out there, again, there's many ways to make money. There's many ways to succeed, but when you can combine it with something that your purpose, one, you have a incredible advantage because you're playing the long game, right? If you know your outcome, you know that your outcome is to serve, and people serve through different ways, right? So when I discovered my outcome to serve through flow, then I started proactively seeking out what goes towards that outcome. Like our unconscious then picks up, like, oh, okay, there's so many conversations. Oh, that conversation flashed in my mind. That book about 4-Hour Work Week, or that book about Eat, Move, Sleep. That was when I had a breakthrough about health. I remember like doing this open eye meditation in the, I went to the full moon party in Koh Samui, and I remember wandering into the waters like a couple 100 feet out, and I laid there, and I just had an awakening about, man, I should really treat my health as the foundation of everything, because with energy you can do anything. With energy you can show up more in your relationships, you can show up more for your business, or you can show up more for your family, friends, so those two books had really had an impact, because once I started reading that book, Eat, Move, Sleep, I started to just take a lot of tools from it, like standing when I'm working, like moving around, or like learning about the 80-20 rule, or Pomodoro techniques. Again, the key, a key, is to at times chunk up into what is your intention behind
what's chunk up.
Chunk up is like to zoom out.
Gotcha.
To look at the, what you're doing from a 30,000 feet high angle, right? Oftentimes we can get in the rat race and the details of like, okay, in this business, I gotta do sales, I gotta do marketing, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. That's why I love traveling, taking you out of your normal day-to-day element, and then asking yourself the tough questions. Yes, I've been doing this, but like, what is the truth? What is your truth? And then zooming out, chunking up to look at, reminding yourself of the why. People focus on the how way too much. When you remind yourself of the why, then you're unconscious and you put yourself into flow state. See, our unconscious is so much more powerful than our conscious mind. Our unconscious, like, if I took a look around, like my conscious records, like there's that there, but our unconscious records everything. All the books you've ever read, all the TED Talks you ever watched on it, your unconscious, when you're in flow state, your unconscious brings forth the relevant information when you need it, where you need it, how you need it. And I found, whether it's through traveling, or, going into the wilderness and meditating and just being still and, embracing Mother Nature, or just like finding some silence or time to just think proactively versus reacting, right? There's so much to react to in the world, right?
Yeah.
And when we discover that from within our purpose, then we'll proactively start to manifest things and draw upon things into our lives. So those are two books that I felt were pretty, like the health and the foundation of sleeping better, and then also just the possibilities of, the 4-hour mindset. It wasn't that, like I worked 4 hours a week. I definitely didn't work 4 hours a week, but compared to what I was doing before, just like, I'm just gonna grind it in some dark warehouse somewhere, versus like opening up, exploring, learning from, learning and sharing and growing from even different cultures around the world,
right?
And then saying, oh, that makes sense. Why do people do what they do?
Right.
So I found they say that you're the average of the 5 or 6 people that you're closest to. I found that sixth person for me, once I uncovered about books and knowledge, that sixth person is masters or people from who've shared through books. So then I just started to just read. And there's so much information out there, and you can absorb and learn from people who've already done it. Like Michael Phelps, he won so many gold medals. Like, what are the characteristics that really people who are in peak state, what are they doing that's consistent across the board? So I would say like different books have different impacts on my life, and to reread those books at different parts of your life, you actually absorb and learn different things.
There's a lot of different places I can go with. I'll start off by saying I actually listen to my own podcast.
Beautiful.
Because I'm a different person, a different time.
Yes.
And so I can actually hear different things from what the guests have told me or told the audience. So I actually listen to that. So it's a beautiful practice. Thank you for sharing. Do you, do you look at it more like a portfolio approach, where a specific date, a specific time that you would say, hey, from this time to this time, or from this month to this month, I'm going to focus on growth? Or is it all, for you, would be, let me just take a hiatus and all focus on growth this whole year, versus taking a more of a portfolio approach?
So I've learned about immersion. Complete immersion allows you to break through. Like before, maybe like I would read a book, maybe next week read another chapter, next week read another chapter. Now I've learned the power of immersion. So like this year in particular, I've been just cleared my plate to just go full on into super growth. And that's just going into like events or seminars where, for 5-6 days, you just go fully in and play full out and just immerse yourself into it completely. So I found that to be a great practice, where when you have the breakthroughs that you have at different events, it then becomes about spaced repetition, about incorporating that into your life.
Right, the hours that you were talking about earlier.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the portfolio approach, I technically am doing that because I'm immersing in different things.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I found the power of presence, to be completely focused in on something, learn the breakthroughs, feel what you feel, and then from that create like a routine. Create, I read this book, I think it's called How to Change Your Mind in 21 Days. So after UPW, I took a solo RV trip up into Portland. And I remember I was learning and consuming so much knowledge in that state, and then setting out the plans for, say, like morning routines, and then incorporating, and then keep testing, keep adding what speaks to you the most and what impacts you the most from a third perspective. So I love that you listen to your podcast, because oftentimes we live from our first perspective. But when you can shift into third, you can then see things that you can't see from the first perspective. Because, let's just say from me, from my first perspective, there can be certain blinders, right? Blind spots that we don't see.
Sure.
But when you shift into the third, you can then say, like, how often do people not acknowledge themselves? Right? How often do people just keep thinking, what's next? What's next? I'm going to double my sales. Oh, great. Now I'm going to triple. I'm going to 10x. How often do people not just stop and just say, acknowledge themselves for what they've already accomplished and what they've already done. So from that mindset, I found from the third perspective mindset, you can see the truth. Again, like there's certain practices, certain things that I do, like I've learned from different teachings. Like for example, one is to look in the mirror and to acknowledge yourself every day. Like acknowledge yourself. Like just go on a rant of like 7 things. Just say your name, James. I acknowledge you for. I acknowledge you for recycling today. I acknowledge you for walking that person across the street, and that builds a certain muscle within you and also a practice of acknowledgement. Also like forgiveness, commitment to yourself, and I added a last one, which is gratitude. It's like a muscle. People often see like somebody walking down the street, they're like, super peak performance state. You can say like, oh, that person, like they run a triathlon, or they're super fit or strong, and people can see that outside. But how often can you see into other people's minds how much work they've done into growing and empowering themselves through books or through...
How do you see that?
How do I see?
In others. How much work they have done to overcome whatever challenge they have to achieve the physical state, the mental state, the emotional state, the spiritual state. How do you do that?
You can, just intuitively when you're talking to people, you can see who's present to themselves, right? And that's something, through calibration or just looking at how authentic people are to who they are, right? And that's, you can tell, like people who are super grounded and know their purpose, they know their outcome, they put in the work, or they uncovered what their truth is.
So my next question would be, because you invested quite a lot of money, right, to the Tony's Platinum program, it's like $100,000 or something like that, right? So for your friends who are listening, I have a specific person in mind. That's a mutual friend of ours. He doesn't do programs. He likes to do self-exploration. What would you say to someone like that? Like, hey, you may want to invest in yourself as a way to help you get to the next level of whether it be business or success or fulfillment or relationships. What would you say to that? Because you've done 9 programs or 9 seminars in 1 year. One may say that's a lot. So, and not just the time, the effort, but also the actual dollars, right? So what would you say to someone like that who's listening?
I would say that different people have different ways to grow and learn, So how one learns can be dramatically different, right? Like some people learn through visually seeing things versus hearing it, So I just found that this works incredibly well for me because of all the transformation that I've had. But to others, it just depends on what their mode of learning is, right? I would say one of the deciding factors that I felt was listening to my intuition. Right, when I was at Day with Destiny in December, and there was just a part of me that just felt this was the right thing, and this was the right path. Like it just resonated with me, and I would say then I compared it to like an MBA. So before in the past, I thought like when I was an undergrad, I really wanted to go to MBA school, and I went through this process of like taking a GMAT, studying for it, and then when I got there, I realized, is this what I asked myself, is this what I really want? Even though all the work that I did to get to that point, I was going to go to USC, I even went to orientation, but to uncover what resonates with the way you learn the best. So, this was probably a commitment that I made really quickly based on my intuition is one of the best decisions I made because of all the changes. It's hard to like say to compare to say like, oh, you do this, you will get this result. It's people discovering from within how they learn. You know, and you know, there's a lot of truths out there, a lot of knowledge out there.
Sure.
So, you know, our mutual friend, they could go on a different path completely, but still, there's many ways to succeed.
Right.
It's just owning what works for you, and to be brutally honest with like, if this is moving you forward, what are you willing to do or commit to get to that next level?
Yeah, there's a lot of different paths in the mountaintop.
Yes.
Right, metaphorical. And once you get to the mountaintop, quote unquote, you also realize that there's many mountaintops.
Yeah. Yes.
So, and it's a complete self-evaluation. So what I heard in everything that you said is, well, find your own path, look for different teachers, immerse yourself, and cultivate your intuition.
Yes.
Like that awareness towards yourself.
Yes.
Like what actually feels right for you.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes. And there's this other concept of when I made this decision at the beginning, and again, afterwards I looked back. It's like, oh, it's a big decision. It's a big cost, time, commitment. But it's this idea of victory to the big mind.
What does that mean?
So, you know, when I started my business, I had to figure out, you know, I didn't have a lot of money. I had to be really creative and figure out, you know, maximizing the resources that I had.
Right.
Right. And so I realized what got me to a certain level was that skill of like, okay, if there's, you know, I ended up in 2008 going all in on real estate. I use this example of like, if there's 3 contractors that you could work with, there's like the most cost effective, there's medium range, and then there's the most expensive, right? So I learned when I was starting out, I had to go with, you know, I had to discover how to, with limited resource, how to get really creative with that, the most cost effective.
Right.
Right?
Maximum outcome.
Maximum, yeah. And then as I built that up, I realized that I got to the next level. What got me here isn't what's going to get me to the next level.
Right.
Because certain skills that we learned, let's say, like if you had asked me even a couple of years ago, would I have spent this capital? I'd be like, you know, no way.
Yeah.
But as I'm learning, even from like my mentor, just observing, just like victory to the big mind is this practice or art of like, yeah, you hit a certain level, but you have to let go of certain things, right? Let go of certain mindsets that the principles may apply, but like, you know, elevating your standard. And I felt that's what I did with that decision. And so committing to growth, commitment into yourself and your truth, I would say it's a victory to the big mind, because you know the small mind might be like, oh, this, you know, where can I get? Is this return gonna, you know, like just keep going into like trying to figure out, oh, is this actually gonna return? Versus my intuition spoke to me like, this is for sure the path. This is not just the MBA about how to be successful. This is, you know, tied in with everything, right? With health, contribution, with growth, with love, with teaching other people. And so that's how I made my decision.
So you've carved out a certain budget, certain time, certain effort to the pursuit of growth.
Yeah.
You have immersed yourself in different wisdom teachings, or more specifically, Platinum Partnership with Tony Robbins. Right? He's your guy right now.
Yeah.
So what other ways do you put in place as a way to help you elevate your standard? or continuing to live at that elevated state rather than, oh, it was great for a weekend and then let me go back to my normal state now?
Great question, and I always share this with people who inquire about this now or ask me like, how do I maintain this state? It's breakthroughs can happen any moment, right? When you are in a change of state, if you will, you break through, you see what is possible.
By state, you mean a momentary emotional feeling. Is that accurate?
Yeah, like the state of how you're being.
Okay.
Right? So
I just wanted to make sure that our listeners understand what we're talking about.
So with that, like from that state of transformation, it's not just about mountaintops. It's about enjoying the entire journey. Even the challenges as opportunities for growth. So one of the things I did immediately was I started to do priming in the morning. So I started
What's that?
Priming is basically this practice where one, you do deep breathing, so you oxygenate the brain. You know, first thing you get up before like reacting, cell phones, things like that. To do deep breathing, drawing energy within you. Then you bring up 3 moments in time when you felt so grateful, and you go into those moments. So you're reliving those moments of gratitude, right? Then you visualize. You visualize like your outcome. You visualize like what is your not just goal, what is your outcome, and see it as done already. So it's basically like a way to prime yourself for the day. So to set your intentions is another one, and also to kind of feel like you know, another part of it is visualizing like a light cleansing you, giving you strength. So it's a combination of all those things that puts you into a state where you're like, oh, I'm ready for today. Today is going to be another incredible day, regardless of what happens, because every day is amazing. Every day is another day where we have so much to be grateful for. What we focus on is where the energy goes.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're focused on what we fear, that's what you're creating. That's what you're putting your energy and attention to,
Right.
rather than having your outcomes at the beginning of the day. Like, okay, I'm at Day with Destiny, one of my contribution outcomes is to give and give now. So there I put out to the universe that I'm going to build my first school.
Right.
And dedicate it to my grandmother. And it's a funny thing, when you release it out to the universe by saying it, by writing it, by just constantly focusing your intention and energy on it. There's something very powerful about the law of attraction. Somebody then introduced me like, oh, this person's already built the school in the Philippines. Let me introduce you guys. So priming has a lot of, it also creates a certain certainty that grounds you, to prepare you for the day, and also prepare you for taking the steps, progress to your outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, where do I even begin? For the people who don't yet quite believe in the power of our intention, this is hard to fathom, because it feels like a lot of woo-woo stuff, like, it's not tangible, it's not measurable, how do you actually do it? But if you really think about it, everything that you see around you at one point was an idea in someone's head. And there is a gap between intention and reality, physical reality. So how do you actually sustain that intention to reality? I think what you're sharing is a very powerful practice. And people may not actually practice everything, but I think a good place to start may be putting yourself in a state where you're resourceful.
Yes.
As in, what are you grateful for?
Yeah.
What do you want to acknowledge? What have you done? You know, as a way to, you can call it whatever you want to call it, placebo effect and anything. I don't care anymore, right? At this point, I care about the effect. The effect is I am more resourceful because of these practices. Hell yeah, go for it. Whatever you want to believe, right? I'm very much in the same way, you know, priming and, you know, getting into the body and meditate and resourceful and set my intention and what are you grateful for sure, all of that. But I just wanted to underline to someone who's listening who may not be a convert just yet. Whatever you do to put yourself in a more resourceful state, do that thing.
Yes.
Do it. And then you can try out some other things that these, you know, practices that James are talking about, because at the end, it's about, if you're listening to this particular podcast, it's about results, right? Are you more resourceful to go out and actually bring that beautiful idea in your head into reality? If yes, do it. If no, stop doing it. That's it.
Right.
It's pretty simple, from my point of view.
Yeah, testing out different things, I would say, you know, because I was very, very left-brained.
You're speaking to one right now too?
Yeah. Very, very, just very, very logical. And that can be a great attribute for, you know, building businesses and things like that. But I would say on this journey, I started just keeping an open mind to what is possible, and then just testing it. I'm like, oh, if I absolutely believe in this and, you know, consistently show up, it's like, oh, it works.
Yeah.
You know, oh, you know, versus, you know, I would say to some of your listeners, one, the problem is usually not the problem.
Right.
The problem is usually the state that you enter the problem in.
I see.
So the same scenario can happen, but from a different state, a state of empowerment or a state of like a resource that you have where you just absolutely crushed it. From that state, more possibilities can emerge and more choice can emerge. And that, I believe, is tapping into your unconscious as well. When you're in state, you know, because there's like, let's say, different parts of us that wants different things, and sometimes we're in conflict. Like, oh, we want A here, but then we don't want to give that up for B, you know. And to me, that's like finding the congruency of who you are, where all parts of you are coming together to stand for what your purpose or what you're about. Finding, and that's like, to me, that's like about flow, right? So again, you don't have, the power of the mind and what you believe in is incredible, right? So test it out.
Right.
And if something's not working,
Yeah.
then try something else and try something else,
Right.
you know? But yeah, I would find from my journey, like the more I've opened my mind to the possibilities, and again, now when I'm learning, it's not like, oh, I have to agree 100% with one methodology, right? But from that, if I have a filter, like, you know,
You're
whatever,
already skeptical.
yeah, if you're already skeptical about something,
Yeah.
you know, if you already have that filter and lens, then your mind will make that true.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I was right.
Yeah.
This is, you know,
Doesn't work.
This doesn't
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and you just make that right. Versus if you approach completely from a open-mindedness, you could learn, let's say, 10% from this, you know, from this book, because you could reject 90%. But if you take that 10%, and then from another book or idea, you take 50%, then you're building more and more knowledge. Versus like, I don't want to change, or I don't, you know, I heard this, or my friend said this about this book, therefore, like, oh, you know, I respect him, therefore, you know, this book is not what it's about.
So let me ask you this. To some people, it's scary to be that open-minded, to really look the whole construct, the whole scaffolding of their belief system, all their memories, good or bad, right? Traumas, things that are embarrassed about. things that are traumatized by the bullying experience.
Right.
So what do you say to that? It's scary. So what do you say to them?
I would say that one of the things that I've learned from my mentor is that how uncomfortable you're willing to get and be there is inversely related to how successful you'll be in life. Because that's where the growth is. Again, the fear is there for some reason. Like it's the past, like the mind wanting to protect itself, right? The human survival instinct of like, like this is uncomfortable, therefore I don't want to feel it. Just from experience, breaking through at whatever pace, there's at times dissatisfaction and opening. When you break through, you'll say, your mind then you'll think, what else is possible? Like for example, before, let's say with skydiving, I remember when I was like 17 or 18, a friend of mine was going into the military. He said, you want to go skydiving? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And the night before skydiving, guess what I did? I Googled how many people die skydiving.
As a left-minded person would do?
Right?
Yeah.
Not really moved. I even watched a video of some guy bouncing. So
oh man,
I backed out. And I had always felt some kind of regret from that, And so throughout the years, I broke it down into multiple steps. Right? First, it was like rock jumping in Hawaii. I was like, oh, this is fine.
Like cliff diving?
Cliff diving, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, this is fine. This is actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then next, I went to Rio when I was exploring the 4-hour work week lifestyle. Went to Rio for the World Cup.
Yeah.
And found out that hang gliding is one of the safest places in the world to hang glide.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So you go off the 5,000 feet and you run off a cliff, and then it's like a big kite.
Right.
And you're just soaring through the clouds.
Right.
And then I was like, I think I'm ready for skydiving.
Yeah.
And then some time passed, and another friend asked me, you want to go skydiving? I said, sure. And so we go to Santa Barbara.
Yeah. And
it's the only place that they advertise on the West Coast that can go 18,000 feet. Right? Versus 13,000 normally. You have to go. You have
a little longer.
A little longer, yeah. You have to wear oxygen mask. You have to go up this plane, extra 5-10 minutes to climb to the ascent. And I remember when I got there to that desk, everyone in the group went for 13,000, and I said, you know what? I'm already here. Let's do 18,000.
Yeah. When you do something, you go big. That's your style.
That's my style.
Yeah.
And when I jumped off that plane, first, just to share the viewers who, if they haven't been skydiving, they'll open the door and they'll say, okay, on the count of 3, we're gonna go.
Right.
And on the count of 1, they just push you out. They must have had too many refunds or something at 2. So, but because I was the only person doing the 18,000 feet, I witnessed this. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I'm ready. And so after everybody went, I'm just there climbing. The door opens. You always have to go with an instructor.
Yeah. Tandem.
Tandem, right. And they put me outside the plane, and all of a sudden I hear my instructor say sorry to the captain. So apparently he opened the door too early. So I was hanging outside of the plane for a good 2 minutes. Just felt like a lifetime, right? Wow. And I was just hanging there like a kangaroo, and I was looking down. The whole ride up, I felt a sense of calm. This is, I'm ready for this. Yeah. And even when I was hanging, I was like, oh man, this is a unique experience. I get to actually hang out of the plane. Again, it's what the mind, what you focus on. And then when I first went, this is on video, that first moment of free fall, I was like, oh man, this just rush. But after that initial moment, I like just basically rocked out the whole way down. I was doing like Superman, you know, I was like, and let me just share this with your listeners. When you do something that you once thought you could not do in your life before, that it was not a possibility, and you do that, your brain then opens up to thinking, what else can I do that I once thought I couldn't do? And that is an empowering feeling, because then you realize the you now in the present is so much more wiser. You know, there's so much more growth. There's so much more, the adult you, if you will. You know, what have you limited yourself from past experience? Maybe a rejection when you were, in middle school or something, like asking a girl for a dance or something like that. What did you previously decide was like, and has that hesitation? It empowers and opens up so many doors. And the more you do that, the more then you can, a metaphor could be like leveling up in a video game, right? You're just adding more and more levels, and then you, I don't want to say achieve, you break through. You break through to more of what's the possibility that you can create for yourself and create for others. And that's what I would say. It's like, if something, something really, you're really afraid of it, a question is why? Where did this fear come from? Sometimes people even forget about it consciously, like something that happened to them when they were young, right? There could be some kind of negative anchor, right? Like if let's say, for example, if I was 6 and somebody took a clipboard and was just hitting my head and beating me up on it, right? Beating me up. It could be like 20, 30 years later, we could be having a great conversation with a friend, just having a magnificent night, hanging out. All of a sudden, they bring a clipboard out, and I'm like, oh, I don't exactly remember being beat up by a clipboard, but my unconscious is like, signal, SOS.
Danger.
Yeah. And, maybe it's CK. I don't know what's, and then it's a fight or flight feeling that comes up.
Right.
So to really go into why does it make you feel uncomfortable, I think is important. Because again, at the end of that wall, and I've broken through a lot, and again, it's a journey, right? But when you break through of walls that once limited you, the possibilities open up, and that's such an empowering feeling. Then you're like, oh, well, I was this way before because of what happened. Like, for example, even doing this podcast, right? I remember when I think it was like 6th or 7th grade, all of a sudden this memory came to me just recently. Like, I was part of a play where I was literally like the tree in the play. I was a prop. And I was just standing there, and I was just like beating myself up, like, look, you can't have, and then.
Wait, why are you beating yourself
up? I was beating myself up because I was judging myself for being like no speaking role, and then maybe the past of like being bullied and like came up, and then so now, just empowering myself to share my voice. Right. I realize it's part of my destiny.
Yeah, what a journey from being a tree to a noble warrior.
Yeah. So and then I realized it's not about me. It's about what I can impact. What I can share. And as I broke through this year, starting to do Facebook live videos.
Oh, right! Amazing, by the way. You
Thank
keep
you.
doing it.
Just
keep dancing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I
Just
love
reminding myself that even if I can impact one person, that that I'm serving, I'm contributing, and that has elevated me to rise above the natural, previously tendency of like, I don't have to speak in front of a lot of people, right? Versus now it's like, what can I share with people through my journey? Because everybody has challenges that they overcame. Everybody has a voice. I truly believe that everyone has a gift. Everyone is amazing as they are. Oftentimes they just don't see it, or they reflect what is social or cultural conditioning of like, oh, I got to go this path in order to be AKA successful, or do what my parents expected out of me, in certain cultures.
Right.
But the process of freeing and awakening yourself is it's so beautiful that I just wanted to share, like, and take it step by step if you want. Or when there's opening of where discomfort becomes to a certain point, where discomfort becomes like there's an opening of like where you're gonna make a change and you're gonna make it now. Break through and then make actions that commit yourself to that, and continue to grow. Right. When I was done after college, I was like, oh, I don't have to read anymore. And I was like, no, that's not true. There's so much. The more I've learned, the more there is to learn, I found. So, there's some statistic that after college, a certain percentage of the population is just like, I don't have to read anymore.
Right.
And I would say, reading allows you to get insight into what other people and their stories of what they share. And there's so many incredible journeys out there, from people overcoming phobias to past traumas and
bullying.
Bullying, or like whatever fear that they had and they overcame it and they share that. It's a beautiful thing, because that inspires more people to say, hey, he grew up in in San Gabriel Valley, like Tony actually came from San Gabriel Valley. Say, oh, that's possible. To see what is possible of what life can be possible. I felt truly empowering.
One of the things that I realized because I'm very much, so I grew up with tiger parents, very much an outcome-driven type of parenting. If I didn't achieve a certain outcome, the effort wasn't worth it, kind of a thing. So I learned that over the years, the analogy, the metaphor is, if I'm watching an NFL play and say, hey, I want to do football, but I'm not yet at an NFL level, I'm worthless for not being an NFL, without realizing that they took 10,000, probably 20,000, probably 30,000. So I'm going from zero and judging myself from being at zero, where they are already at 20 to 30,000. And, then, and of course, it's like, I'm not doing that, especially if I come from an outcome-driven kind of perspective.
Right.
Versus an effort-driven. Like, hey, I'm going to enjoy every step of the journey.
Enjoying the process.
Enjoy the process. So one of the latest things that I'm practicing right now is boxing. And case in point, and it really got me to that primal state of survival. Because someone is punching me in the face. Right? And I will notice being aware of the awareness, these flinching moments, where I know logically in my mind I should lean forward and make a hook or whatever it may be, the combination that I have. But when that fist is coming your way the second time, they already punch you the first time. Like, so the fist is coming again and the second time. The flinching is real. And then for me, spiritually speaking, it's a perfect opportunity for me to actually lean forward, because that's where the growth opportunity happens.
Beautiful.
Right?
I love that. Yeah.
And that's actually, people think like, why are you a PhD guy, entrepreneur, why are you doing this boxing thing? It makes no sense. But for me, it's actually a spiritual practice. Because the thing is, I can meditate all day and believe that I can be calm. And I am calm most of the time.
Yeah.
How do you be calm and meditative when someone's punching you in the stomach, in the face, in the body shots? That to me is the real test. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So similarly, entrepreneurship, you can be meditative all day, you can have all the theories all day, but when you're looking at your cash flow and you got to make payroll, and sometimes you're like, how the hell am I going to make that happen? How do you actually tap into the inner resource and be creative and actually make that happen? that's when the real test comes. That's the way I look at all these different paths, but it's still the same spiritual path, just different way. Yeah, as a parent, as a spouse, as a brother, as a son, as a friend, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a podcaster.
So for me, it's about flow. Like what you mentioned about boxing, I think that's a great example of like where your primal instincts kick in.
Right.
You know, when someone's actually punching
Fight,
you.
fly, or freeze.
Yes. And so I would say tapping into one's flow and what resonates with them, let's say boxing in your case, when you, let's say, practice or you do it over and over where your unconscious then like knows what to do to react without thinking, I gotta defend, right? And just reacting and unconsciously ducking. When you're in that state of flow, your unconscious knows what to do. So I would say similarly to business, when you're looking at cash flow, you can react to like, okay, sales, I need to get this or this. If you put yourself into that state of flow and apply that to that context, new things will emerge.
So let me ask you a follow-up question there, right? So in the book Blank, Malcolm Gladwell said, this whole idea of flow and tapping into it. He said, you're more likely to make the correct choice when you have all the 10,000 hours already. So you can actually be more intuitive and connect the dots in the correct path, right? In that blink of a moment, hence the name Blink.
Yeah.
So I can tell you that right now, if I trust my instincts in boxing, when I'm still learning, I'm going to make the incorrect assessment and freeze. Because that's the fight, fly, or freeze, right? That's like what our primal instincts will resort to. So in the learning process, then how do you distinguish basically being flow at the same time, knowing that you're still in training? Does that kind of make sense, what I'm asking?
Yes. So, I mean, is someone coaching you with the boxing? So when you model after someone who has done 100,000 hours, you can learn unconsciously from them.
I see.
And you can get there much quicker
Gotcha.
without putting this, because I had this thing also as well before of like, what is a master? Like, I haven't done 10,000 hours.
What is a master, actually? Let's go down that rabbit hole.
So before I would relate it from my past experience, like, you have to do 10,000 hours to become a master. But that's a judgment and a limiting belief that only when you hit 10,000 hours will you become ready. So master, a friend mentioned this to me, could be said as when you have someone to teach.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that kind of perspective helped me be conscious of the language that I was using, because for a period I was like, Tony said this person said this, and there's truth that the master's being, Tony's done it for 40 years. But, for me, if I think, only when I get to 40 years will I become a master, is not congruent with the truth of like, this is something that, as far as coaching or empowering people, you can do right away, right? But without judging yourself to placing that label of like, only then will I be ready. Again, that could be a hesitation or some kind of past limiting belief of like, only when you put in 10,000 hours will you become a master. So I would say one,
readiness to teach.
I see. But master can be someone who has someone to teach. I found by modeling after someone who's done it for 100,000 hours or however many, you learn from it much quicker.
Yeah, I see.
So even besides just doing it and like, training, like sparring, watching how somebody who, trains 7 days a week or, who, I don't know, won a gold medal, or like going for the best, and observing them, modeling after them, learning like, what did they do? What did they do that's different, that makes them win a gold medal, right? And then from that, you can take away so much more quicker, I found.
One of the best way that I learn as a way to accelerate learning, because I'm the kind of person, and also I would assert people who are listening to this podcast, it's more about achieving the outcome more accelerated way, right? More effective, more efficient kind of way. So one of the mental model I want to share with you as well with the listeners is you learn from the masters or even the grandmasters, people who've done it a lot more hours than you.
Yeah.
And you also synthesize and teach those who are a few steps behind you.
Yes.
So it's this learning and teaching way will really help you articulate, well, number one, be aware of what is it that you know, what is it that you don't know, as well as to embody it. Because now you're also accountable to embody it to your students, whoever it may be, right?
Yes.
And this way, learn one and then teach one, to me, is learn from one and teach to another one is, to me, the most accelerated way that you can really learn something. That's the way I think about it.
I agree with that 100%. I realized when I am at these events, taking notes and learning, but with the intention of teaching it, you learn it in a different way. You absorb more. Because if you only learn what you consciously think applies to you, there's so much more material content that you might just filter off. Versus when you're learning to teach, you just activate your brain in a so much more engaging way. And then when you teach it, one, you're sharing the love and you're sharing the knowledge. Two, you're also absorbing it so much more quicker. So I definitely agree with that. And that's something that I found through my journey of like learning and then sharing it, learning and sharing it. And so, before I had this language with what is a master that, like, okay, after this year, or after, then I'll start I'll feel like I'm more ready to share. Versus when I had that 2 millimeter shift in mindset, then I just started just sharing.
That's awesome.
Sharing from the heart.
Yeah, because otherwise you're always, I can speak for you, I was always in student mode.
Right, exactly. You're always judging yourself like, I could be better.
Right, because I'm looking at myself through the NFL player, bringing
correct,
metaphor
correct.
back, right? I'm
Yes.
looking at the grandmasters. I'm looking at world's number one.
Correct. Yes.
Or even for me, since I'm in the intersection of entrepreneurship and spirituality, I'm looking at the grandmaster, the Confucius, the Lao Tzu, the Alan Watts. Like these are like master storytellers, the Jesus Christ, right? And I'm like, I'm not ready to be that just yet. So cool, beautiful. So since your purpose, your mission is to share about flow, do you want to finish this podcast with some of the tidbits of, because I know we went over a few already, but to summarize, if people are interested in tap into flow more in their life, what might be like 3 things that they could do to actualize this idea if they're inspired by your story?
So I would say, for one, like when meditating, or think of the moments in their life where they felt the most flow, right? So one is to recall the moments and be there. Like go into those moments, like recreate that in your mind with your eyes closed as vividly as possible, and take a look around and see like that memory that's a part of you already when you were in fully flow state and you had a resource within you. So recall that memory and go deep into it, and then from that step into a certain context where you feel unresourceful, right? So it's a practice of basically like, whatever hesitation or fear comes up, about making a decision to go with one way versus another, and you're uncertain, I would say a practice that one can do is to go into the past of what's already worked for them individually, and to bring it up visually and make it as bright and big as possible, and then from that state, then go into the context of what that decision. And then your unconscious, if you continue to train that as part of a muscle, then your unconscious will guide you more and more into better and better decisions of what's right for you, when it's right for you. So that would be one practice. Second practice is, doing something every day that puts you into flow. Right? For some people, it's meditation, priming. But what's the activity that you do when you're just not really thinking about it, and or a gift you have? Some people play music. Some people sing. Like whatever speaks to them, where they put themselves in that state of just being present now, and doing that as a daily practice or consistent practice, so that feeling is there, versus when I win the Grammys, then I feel like I achieved something, and then that lasts for like a minute, right? And then you have to wait to win another Grammy before you feel.
That's right.
I've met so many peak performers throughout my journey where, one, they don't acknowledge themselves, and then they only feel like it's flow when they have that achievement, but it's only very brief. So consistently putting yourself in a state that just feels right to you, right? And so if people like dance, dance every day. Why wait? That's one of the things I discovered about my journey. It's like, why wait till events, festivals, or to dance? What if you could just dance every day? What if you could dance through life?
Yeah.
Like, again, that's what resonates with me personally.
Yeah. Keep doing it, by the way.
For sure. I am. Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, do something that just resonates with your truth, even when there's no external acknowledgement, or just something that speaks to your truth. It could be, boxing. It could be golfing. Like whatever puts you in that state. Whatever puts you in that state, and then so you have that feeling within you. You ever have certain days where things just seems to go your way, things are just flowing. You feel like unstoppable, or you feel like just a rhythm to things. Find ways to put yourself into that rhythm, and then watch how that can apply to other parts of your life. Would be the second. Third would be, I would more understand and read it. There's a book, Stealing Fire, that I've been reading.
Stephen Kotler, Jamie Wheel.
Yeah. Reading about flow. I feel like at times there's blockages in us, and that could come from fear, that could come from hesitation. To understand this concept of flow, I would highly recommend reading more about why are some people just in that state all the time, and what are the patterns around that one can model after. So I would say the third thing is just learning more about flow and how to bring more flow into their lives.
I want to actually add one more by Josh Waitzkin. He wrote it in The Art of Learning. Josh Waitzkin was the inspiration for this movie called Finding Bobby Fischer. I think that's the name. And he was one of the youngest chess prodigy. He won the world champion at his level at 8 years old, and has since actually went out of chess and be a world champion in push-hand Tai Chi. He now is a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, so he really is a master of learning. The meta aspect of learning, he's a master of that. So one thing that he said about tap into flow is this. So there are certain things that he naturally do that would put him in flow naturally. For him, was playing with his kids, or his kid, rather. He would then add a habit, an anchoring habit.
Ah, nice.
Before he naturally would play with his kid.
Yeah.
So as a way to anchor that flow state, and then will train himself to get into that state faster and faster. So instead of, say, 15 minutes before he play with his kid, he would then shorten it to 10 minutes, to 5 minutes, to then 1 minute, and actually put himself in that state. So then he can recall that flow state whenever he wants, before a push hand competition or before a serious chess, competition, things like that. So that's another way to look at, instead of generating from nothing, cultivating flow state from meditation or whatever it may be, to just anchor it to whatever it is that you naturally do anyway. So that's another way to do it.
I think that's beautifully shared. Anchoring as a way to bring back that state, like doing something unique, or a feeling in your body, or a visual anchor, or even music can anchor. Like play a specific song when you are, absolutely just being in flow. Like just doing something that, whether it's like, let's say, playing a guitar, right? Like let's say somebody just flowing through guitar, playing a certain music, and that anchors it. And then so when they come up with a challenge, or there's a challenge that arises, playing that same music, and then seeing from that, like, more choice can emerge, and more perspective of how to address that challenge.
Love it. Thank you. Actually, there's one thing I forgot to ask you about peer group.
Yes.
Because you're now running with different level of people at the Platinum group. How does that change you, or help you maintain level of flow state, or taking bigger actions, or beyond what you think is possible, things like that? Any want to speak about that a little bit?
Yes.
The importance of peer group.
Yes, I would say peer groups is very important because of who you choose to surround yourself with. Like I mentioned earlier, you can be the average of the 5 or 6 people around you. For me personally, it's elevated me to a new standard of what I set for myself by learning and growing and sharing with others who are like-minded and on this path, right? So, I'm part of accountability group, where we come together and we share our top 5%, bottom 5%. It's important to have like a mastermind group. And they talk about this, most people know Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. There's also a secondary book, Law of Success, that I've found incredible, and talks a lot about this. By being able to bounce ideas and to share the victories, the battles, the defeats, there's something about that where you create an energy that is, how do you say, you create a certain community mindset energy that you'll be able to see things that you wouldn't see just from your perspective. A lot of times people think the conscious mind has a lot of thoughts. But when you express it and you're able to express your outcome to your peer group, you're able to express your goals. Once you say it out loud, there's something about that that makes it more real. That makes it more like you hold yourself accountable to it. Because if I and I noticed this with my accountability groups, with my mentor and now mentees, by sharing that, you create this synergistic energy. That's just something powerful about growing together and being able to share in the the victories, celebrating the victories. So again, sometimes we don't celebrate it enough, right? The acknowledgement of what we do, or who we are, and also to be able to brainstorm about the challenges to get different perspective. I found so insightful because you'll be able to see like, oh, there's another way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So the power of the peer group, since joining Tony's Platinum Partners, I feel so grateful of just learning from each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's a level of open-mindedness and community that I really feel like a sense of belonging. And I'm very honored to be part of that. And even just among also my accountability groups and the people I have around me.
Thanks so much for sharing. One of the things that I share with you privately, and people may not know about it, is because I hold these masterminds as well, right, for entrepreneurs, and we go through transformational experience. Yes. We create a safe container for people to really talk about what needs to be talked about. And there's certain, there's a huge value in that, because one of the mental models I share with people is performance equals flow minus interference. And in a safe container, you can take an honest look about what's interfering with your intention, with your performance, with your goals, where you want to get to. And also in that container, in that safe container, you can then speak your intention into being. Power of speaking, putting words and into a powerful listening of these powerful people that are in the group. That to me, speaking in a spiritual sense, is super powerful, because it's not just speaking to nothingness and to the abyss. You're now speaking to a very powerful listening, and if you do that with the entire group, the ripple effect, it truly accelerates your from an intention to reality. That's really one of the impetus, the reason why I created the group as a way to help bring more positive changes into the world. So, James, I really acknowledge you for sharing your story, your narrative, and you were so generous in sharing with us that truly, you pay so much money for, right? The tools, the books, the different mental models. So for people who are inspired by your story, how do they find out about tapping into more of the flow in their life, in their relationships, in their business? Where can they find you? Where can they follow you?
So right now, I basically first thank you for this opportunity. I'm just so honored again to be able to share, like you having this amazing platform of sharing your gift. Really makes an impact on people. So thank you for that. So right now I essentially am doing one-on-one coaching at the moment. So I'm sharing flow sessions about tapping into different tools and techniques of how to empower people and tapping into their flow. So I can share with you some details afterwards about how to get in touch with me.
We'll put it in the show notes?
Yeah,
okay.
In the show notes.
Great.
For the next couple weeks right now, I'm here in LA, and I'm just doing all these flow sessions, one-on-one flow sessions, whether through in person or Zoom.
Oh, beautiful.
I'll share with you the details, and listeners whoever is interested.
All right, amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, James. All right, guys, focus on flow and do what James told you.
And one more thing I would say is, be the light that you want to see in the world.
With that, have a beautiful rest of the day, guys. Take care.
Enjoy.